So what do we see? We saw last time that he says what it says in Pirkei Avos. Don't serve the master in order to receive a reward. That's only talking about what? About what you're required, what you're obligated to do.
Right.
So what you're required to do, you shouldn't involve self-interest in it.
Right.
There you should get rid of self-interest. That's the first, you might say, stipulation of keeping it clean. Because the moment that has self-interest in it, then it deteriorates. And it becomes, is it comfortable for me, not comfortable for me? And people begin to introduce arguments that are not related to the topic. And so they might become more lenient where they don't need to, or they might become more stringent where you don't need to, all because of this self-interest that gets involved.
How can self-interest make you be stricter? Because you think you get a bigger reward.
Of course. So that's basically the gist of it. The moment that you start, it's sort of like saying that this is the body of the mitzvah, and in the body of the mitzvah there should be the considerations don't need to be the psychological considerations. In the body of the mitzvah,
there's the chumras, you're not doing the extra mitzvah, and there's no problem with asking for a reward.
Okay, but if it's a chumrah and it's not related to and you see it as a chumrah, that this is above and beyond, this is not related to the body of the mitzvah. So therefore, there I can, again, I would think of it in the same way that I think of a human body. There are certain things. Let's say a person has to undergo some treatment or surgery, whatever, and psychologically, and they're very afraid. And so if they can't divorce the psychological side from what they need to do physically, then they'll be hurt because they need to do the physical procedure. So you have to get over it. And the same thing is true about mitzvos. Mitzvos have a body and they have a soul. And the body has to be done almost mechanically, without involving the psychology. But the moment that you're going beyond what the obligation is, there you can begin to add self-interest. Again, within reason. But
you just took all the kavanah out of all the mitzvahs.
Why?
You said you're going to be like a robot.
Okay, the kavanah is just that I'm doing it because it's a mitzvah. We've talked about this many times. That when you do a mitzvah, you don't have to have any kavanos in mind, except for one thing. I'm doing it because God commanded me to do it. Not for any other reason. Not because I enjoy taking a swim in the mikveh, and because I need to, that's the only way I can. And during the 9 days, this is very common. People go there because they say, there I can take a nice hot shower. At home I can't. But when it's a mitzvah, it's okay. All kinds of things like that. So that's one way of looking at it. And then he says, and then...
When we lived in the Tanya.
Sorry?
When we lived in the Tanya, we met up with a non-religious Jewish couple that had no children. Been married for quite a while, 5-10 years. And we started to encourage them. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we told them they should write a letter to the Rebbe to ask for bracha for children. So the Rebbe wrote back. I don't remember the exact words, but the Rebbe wrote back, well, you should start to keep Taharas Mishpacha. And you should know that every single mitzvah is a sinor for a certain...
It's a conduit for a certain type of...
reward.
Affluence.
Use the word and so therefore, if you will start keeping Taharas Mishpacha, therefore you will bring down from Hashem the benefit of having children. Right. So therefore you're saying, the Rebbe is saying here the exact opposite of what you just said. That every single mitzvah has a reward.
It's not a reward. That's what comes down as a result.
That's a reward.
And it doesn't matter.
You're just playing with words.
It doesn't matter whether or not you think about all the kavanos in the books of Kabbalah, or you don't think about them. Right. The act is what makes it.
I don't really want to keep Taharas Mishpacha.
Again, to call it a reward.
To call it, says, if I keep Taharas Mishpacha, I'll have children.
So that's an extraneous argument that you say to people, and you say to them, look, the nature of the world is such that when God set it up, and He built the world in such a way that when you do such and such actions, the natural product of those actions, the actual natural consequence, is that this and this will happen. Okay? It's not a reward. It's just what happens. It's the conduit to make this happen. Okay? You have to add to that.
If you eat healthy, you become healthy. That's a reward for eating healthy.
It's not a reward, though. Every person understands it's a cause and effect. Reward says that, like we talked about last time, that somebody is doing a job in my house, and I see that he's doing it in an extra careful way, and he's extra conscientious about it, and this and that, and they come and say, I want to give you extra. That's the reward. That's what he's calling a reward. He's not talking about the natural consequences of doing the mitzvah. The natural consequences are because Hashem set the world up the way that He set it up. There are certain things that are dependent on performance of mitzvot. Certain things that are not. Okay, not everything is dependent on the performance of mitzvot. Gravity is not dependent on it. For some strange reason. We don't know why. Although there are some people that think that it is. Okay. אותן המצוות צריך לקיימן רק מצד כי רצון השם ובנחת רוח לפניו. Everything that is a mitzvah, the body of the mitzvah, it should be done because it's Hashem's will, and it gives Him the pleasure of having His will followed. ולא בשביל קבלת פרס עצמו, כי אם עושם בשביל קבלת פרס עצמו נמצא עובד את עצמו ולא את רבו. It doesn't mean again that there's no pras. There is a pras. There is a natural consequence. There is a result of the mitzvah. But that's not why I do it. I do it because Hashem told me to. Again, it's not to confuse the psychology with the act. So, to say that the Rebbe said that there's a reward says that of course there's a reward to everything, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it in order, again, there's not that there's no consequences. There are consequences of the mitzvot, and they're very good. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want to follow Hashem's will. אלא צריך לקיימם ולעשותה רק בשביל קיום רצון הבורא יתברך, שיש נחת רוח לפניו שנעשה רצונו, בסוף הטובה לבוא בכללה. And the end is good. There will come good out of it. But that's not why I'm doing it. because זה לא שייך רק בעיקרי המצוות. The body of the mitzvah, the עיקר of the mitzvah. שמחויב לקיימן למלות רצון הבורא יתברך. וכנ"ל בעניין עיקר המצווה די להחיות העני שעל זה כופין. מה שאין כן על התוספת. But what is additional, what is beyond the letter of the law, מה שגם אם לא היה עושו, היה יוצא ידי חובתו והיה מקיים רצון הבורא יתברך שנחת רוח לפניו שנעשה רצונו בעיקר המצווה כנ"ל, הנה גם אם עושה זה על מנת לקבל פרס, צדיק גמור יחשב. There you're allowed to have other considerations, other conditions. ולזה ניחא לשון אל תהיו כעבדים המשמשים. This is why in Pirkei Avos the lashon, the wording is do not be like servants who are serving. כי כמו העבד שמוכרח לעשות לרבות דברים המצטרכים לו. וכך ישראל מחויבים לשמור ולעשות תרי"ג מצווה שציווה להם הבורא יתברך. ועל מצוות אלו אומר אל תהיו כעבדים המשמשין את הרב. גם בעיקרי הדברים שמחויב לעשות לצורך רבו על מנת לקבל פרס כנ"ל. כי אם כן אינו עובד את רבו כלל. That's why he uses the language of servants or slaves. Because you have to feel that this is an obligation. It's not out of your goodwill. It's not because you decided, oh, I'm going to do Hashem a favor today and put tefillin on. It's because you're obligated in the same way that a servant is obligated to do what he does.
So where's the simcha? If you're obligated, if there's no choice, if it's an all, so there's no simcha anymore. You just eliminated simcha from the question.
Your simcha is in being a servant of Hashem. The act itself is an obligation. It's the same thing that I'm now reading the Rav Groner's book, right?
Yeah, you got it?
Yeah, bought it this week.
You translated it into English?
No? It's poorly written, but it's poorly written. I mean, it's okay. It's the flourishy Haredi language of hagiography, as they call it.
What?
Doesn't matter. It's not the classic Chabad style. It's like it's a very Haredi type of. Chabad style is no nonsense usually. This is what happened. This is what happened as a result, and that's the story. When you start giving flourishy descriptions of people and the places and this and that, okay, it's poor literature. And when I want to read good descriptions, I'm not going to go to a Chabad book. You know, there's better authors in the world who give descriptions. In any case, it's like missing the purpose. So it describes there how we became the Rebbe's secretary, which really in English doesn't really. I don't know. There must be better English words than secretary.
He was never the secretary.
What would you call it?
In the office
There's a name for it. The person who's the meshamish. What do you call it in English? There's a name for it because all the prime ministers and ministers, everybody has a guy like this.
That's Torah.
So what?
That's Torah.
No. So what's the name?
Gopher.
No, he's not a gopher.
Personal assistant.
It's like a butler.
Personal assistant.
Yeah, personal assistant's a nice name for it today. But there used to be a real word for it. I don't remember. Every single person who has
the office.
No, he's not the head of the office. That's the whole thing. That's not what he does. That's why it's not secretariat. It's not. It's true that Reb Label did secretarial work also, but that wasn't his main position. Anyway, so it describes how we got that position of being the Rebbe's personal assistant, and it came out because the Rebbe, you know, in 1946, when the Rebbe needed a minyan in 770 for his father's yortzeit for the year, so he and his older brother, it says there, that they tried to make sure that there was a minyan relatively on time. And then there's the famous thing that Levitan went into the Friediger Rebbe, and he told him that he was one of the elder Hasidim there. You know, the whole thing in 770 was like there were 10, 15 people. There wasn't anybody there. So the Friediger Rebbe said to him, my son-in-law complains that sometimes he has to wait 5 or 10 minutes for there to be a minyan, because he needs to daven in front of the Yamud. So Rabbi Levitan, that's his name, Levitin. It's from the previous generation. Mm-hmm. So he said to the Friediger Rebbe, so what's 5-10 minutes? He says, you don't know my son-in-law. Every minute is a year. If you took away 5 minutes of his life, it's like you took away 5 years. If you take away 10 minutes, it's like you took away 10 years. That's how he feels. So they were helping him for there to be a minyan relatively on time. And then they became connected, and I guess because of this, across the Tov, right?
Label was working in the office.
No, it wasn't working. It was learning. He was learning.
He was helping.
It says there that he was just learning. No, he helped the Rebbe. At some point, the Rebbe came to him and said, "I need help with the publications," and then he started working. But the first encounter was then, and that's how they became connected, because he did something for him. So I don't know what kind of life he led. I don't know if I would want a life like that. I don't think I would.
Does he have a life?
Okay, that's what I mean.
He's on call 24/7.
Okay. And yet,
I'm amazed that he had kids, because he never went home.
Okay.
Pardon the expression.
And yet, nonetheless, I'm sure that he was very happy. Even though he's like a servant who's serving not to receive a reward at all. Why is he happy? He's happy because he was chosen for this tafkid, for this position. Again, it's not a position that fits everybody. But if it doesn't mean that because you're special, you shouldn't be happy about it. Because you fit the position doesn't mean that you shouldn't be happy about it. Oh, because there's nobody else to do it. No, it's not true. There's always somebody else that can do it. And really, when you're talking about being a Jew, so the famous saying from Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, who used to jump up in joy every day when he said, Shela Asani Goy, who didn't make me a non-Jew. He says, why am I so happy? He says, because if you're a non-Jew, it means Hashem thinks that you can make your own way into Yiddishkeit. You can figure out how to convert. You'll figure out the truth. You'll figure it out. We, the ones who are Jewish, who were born, the neshamas that were born Jewish, we wouldn't have figured it out. So Hashem had to make us Jewish because we would never join. So I should be very happy, and I'm very thankful to Hashem for putting me in this position where I can serve him. That's the meaning of the joy. The joy doesn't have to be because of the reward, not at all. The joy is because of my selection, because I was chosen to do to have this position. Right. The main word that he said here is that he's serving himself.
Where did you go to?
In the third paragraph. אבל על תוספי המצוות, in the middle of the paragraph, שעושה, אין כוונתו כלל. כי גם אם עושה מנת לקבל פרס מקרא צדיק גמור, שהרי מוטל עליו החובה לשמש את רבו כהצטרכותו. כבר קיים. So, what is beyond the basic obligations, that I don't have to, I'm not required to do it. So there I can certainly make a deal. I can make conditions. Because I wasn't obligated for this. שלא בשביל שום תשלום גמול כנ"ל. וזה התוספת גם אם עושה מנת לקבל פרס מקרא צדיק גמור. And you're still called a perfect tzaddik, even if you make conditions or you expect to receive a reward on what is beyond the basic obligation. ולזה ייתכן גם מה שאמר בלשון אל תהיו, לשון עצה בלבד. אל תהיו, ולא כמו שכתוב כאן בגמרא, דקראו ליחמיץ. And that, he says, is also why in Pirkei Avos it says it more as a piece of advice. Don't be serving Hashem as if you're supposed to get some kind of reward. But in Rosh Hashanah, he said that when Cyrus gave the necessities for the service of the temple, it was called ichmitz, that he's gone sour. Why the difference? לפי שאומות העולם תוהינה לראשונות, מה שאין כן ישראל. It says, because the nations of the world, they don't accept the axioms. The problem lies with the axioms. It's not, the rishonot is like the first axioms. The first theorems that have to be accepted like an axiom, that you can't prove them. You just have to accept it. You accept it or you don't accept it. But not the Jewish people. ולכן אף גם על עיקר המצווה כשעשה על מנת לקבל פרס לא שייך לומר החמיץ בלשון איסור, רק אל תהיו. So he says by a Jew, because the Jew accepts the axiom, okay? He accepts the axiom. What's the axiom? The axiom is that I'm obligated to serve Hashem. That's my purpose in life.
Well, this guy that you're talking about, according to you, he wasn't Jewish. So how should he know about the axioms? How should he know about it?
No, so he says he's not Jewish. That's why he has harsher language.
But how should he know?
He doesn't need to know.
He's not obligated in any mitzvah.
He doesn't need to know the mitzvahs. He needs to know the general principle of life. What is the principle of life? What are we here for? That's the question. If a person doesn't accept the axiom that man was created as a limited being that has a divine purpose, and the divine purpose is to serve Hashem, to do what Hashem asks me to do. If you don't accept that axiom, so you're dealt with more harshly.
But from where should the guy know that?
I mean, that you know, because everybody knows it. They just don't accept it.
Go into the jungle of Borneo and ask one of the shvazes that live in the forest there. He doesn't know Hashem. He doesn't know what you're talking about.
Now they lost it. You're right. But before a certain time, before the time, somewhere in the there's different discussions in the Gemara exactly when this was lost exactly. But for a long time they had this axiom. They knew about it.
All the time.
Okay. Sometime in the time of the Gemara they stopped. It says that one of the things that ruined it was obviously there was idolatry. Idolatry was always a problem. But we're talking about the ones who didn't serve idolatry. The people who knew that above the idols there is God also. So they always knew this. So it wasn't idolatry, I guess, stops it before it reaches the individual. But in general, they knew this. Sometime in the early Middle Ages, they lost sight of this very basic principle. And certainly humanism that grew out of the Middle Ages with the Renaissance. So that completely upset the whole order of things. And so now they don't have any. But he says, even in the time of Cyrus, Cyrus was a person who, on the one hand, knew the axiom. He was in a time when the axiom was known. And like many of these emperors, he rebelled against Hashem. He said, I'm not here to serve Hashem. It's very interesting because he's sending the needed equipment for the temple. So why is he? Because he says no, it's not. It's like like you said, like an insurance policy. If I really am required to serve Hashem, if I really believe in this God, this one God that you Jews are talking about,
so I've done my bit.
So I need to do this because I need to do this, not because I'm going to get some kind of reward. I need to do it because I'm the one who's responsible. And somebody once told me that that's the difference. Don't get insulted between the British and the Americans. The British will help, but they expect to get everything back in return for free.
They take over the whole country.
So they'll help, I don't know, Iraq, the Gulf states, wherever they started after World War II. But there's a condition. What's the condition? Give me all the oil. The oil belongs to us. We'll help you get it out. You'll get a premium, but really it belongs to us. And the same thing is with Russian gas now. Same everywhere. We'll help you, but not because out of a sense of duty, but because this is what we want. And the Americans, that's why the Rebbe was much more impressed with America, has in its principles that we're supposed to help because we're supposed to help. We have a duty because we're so wealthy, because we're so powerful. That probably is why the British Empire disappeared.
Hundreds of years, the Americans were isolationists.
Not hundreds of years. They didn't have enough ability because there wasn't the ability back then to have a real impact on different on faraway countries. From World War II and on, they changed because the technology changed. But even earlier, sometime in the early 20th century, they began to affect other countries. They began with the Americas and didn't do a very good job. They didn't do a good job, but they did a good job with Canada. They did a really poor job with Mexico. I guess it has a lot to do with the indigenous population also. But in the end, their principles have always been that we have a duty to humanity to act a certain way. And that the Rebbe was very impressed with, and he tried to work with it. He tried to strengthen that duty. I wish today they had this sense of duty. When you take Trump, this is one of the worst things about him is that he had no duty. Absolutely no sense of duty. So even if some of his policies were right, they were like a clock that's right twice a day, a broken clock that's correct twice a day. By mistake, he's right, but he was the last person to be able to take American influence and change things. Although at least he held evil in check. He came and said, "I'm not going to help evil." But the other doctrine, the usual American doctrine, is that even when there's evil, the way that we deal with it is by influencing it. We try to topple the evil. We try to get rid of it. In any case, but so what was the problem? So by a Jew, כשעשה מנת לקבל פרס לא שייך לומר החמיץ בלשון איסור. רק אל תהיו. It says by a Jew, you can't say that he's החמיץ. You can't say that he grew sour. What do you say? It's like a piece of advice. Listen, don't do it this way. Why? Because you're adding into, again, he's performing the mitzvah. The problem is that he's adding his psychology into it. He's adding his self-interest into it. He says, don't do that because in the end, the most important thing is to do the mitzvah. And even if you've added into it your self-interest, it didn't take away from the mitzvah. The mitzvah has still been done. But I'm telling you, as a good piece of advice, this is what Chassidus is. The core of Chassidus is that it's advice. I'm telling you, as advice, don't expect something back from doing what you're obligated to do. If you live your life that way, you're going to have a very poor life. That's really what Chassidus is saying. It's not that Chassidus is halacha. If somebody today comes and he says to me, you know why I put tefillin on every day? Because I expect Hashem to give me A, B, C, D, and E. So, what can I tell you? You must have a very difficult life. Because I doubt that any of A, B, C, D, or E happened because you put tefillin on every day. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but I doubt it. If you want to have a good life, I'm telling you, for your benefit, for your psychological well-being, for your mental well-being, don't have expectations of reward from doing what you're obligated to do. אבל על התוספת, it's a mistake. מותר לכתחילה. But there, when you're talking about what's beyond the obligation, there you're allowed to begin with to have expectations. וכברייתא דאומר סלע זו לצדקה, הרי זה צדיק גמור. And this is what it means that he gives this coin to tzedakah and says, this is for my sons to be well, and so on. הרי זה צדיק גמור. ודאי לא מבין, מה שאין כן באומות העולם, שתוהים גם על תוספת מצווה, אם עושה על מנת, נקרא החמיץ, כי אין נפקותא מאחר שתוהים לא ייטיבו לו וכו'. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. He's not talking about going sour about the mitzvah itself, about the obligation itself. He's talking about the tosefet. They have a question about, do I need to go above and beyond? Meaning he says it's clear. They never lost the idea that the role of man is to serve God. That they have. And what Koresh, what Cyrus gave there was beyond the basic necessities of the temple. And there, because they don't have the concept that you should do more than what you're obligated to, they don't have that concept, they don't have this axiom. So because of that, it's called going sour. So now you have to get into the thinking here. If you don't have a concept of going beyond, what does it do to your psychology? What does it mean when you don't have a concept that I need to go beyond what I'm obligated? So it says that could be, that's din. And that's the measure of judgment. That's what he's saying. That the non-Jews, they don't have a measure of loving kindness, of chesed. That I need to go beyond. Again, you can see from how he approaches it. What he's saying is like this. In Judaism, it's built into the system that there is doing what is obligated and doing what's beyond the obligation. How do we see this? I think the simplest way that we see this is that we have Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the famous joke is that the Jews got tired of the Torah and they went in some village and they said, tomorrow we're giving back the Torah. So they brought all the books that they had, they threw them in the air. And really the Chumashim were gone, Hashem took them, and all the other books fell down. So he said, what happened? Why didn't you take everything? He says, I gave you 5 books. The rest is yours. You invented the rest. Which is a joke, stupid joke, but it serves to illustrate the idea that the reason we're so interested and write so many books is because we believe that the Torah goes well beyond what we're obligated to do. The Torah is the source of how to do everything, including the things that you're not obligated to do. That's why we have Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh is not just part of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the halacha, is to say, how do you do the mitzvah of tefillin? How do you do this mitzvah? How do you do that mitzvah? That's part of it. And that part had to be given from Moshe Rabbeinu, because otherwise we wouldn't know the principles. But really, Jews look in the Torah for everything. Not just for these things. Not just for figuring out how to do a mitzvah. So we have a belief that Torah really encompasses everything. So that's our axiom. The axiom is that there's an oral tradition which is constantly being developed. Why is it being developed? Because we care. Because we say, even when it comes to a minhag, okay, how you do something that, you know what, has nothing to do with halacha even. It's no longer related to halacha. What would be an example of a minhag that is not related to halacha? There are millions of them because we do so many of them. Let's start with one. Covering your head. Every Jew covers his head. Why do you cover your head? It's not halacha. There's not even a hint of it in halacha. It's because we say, look, the halacha is you're supposed to fear God. How do I come to fear God? It's really chovot alavot. It's really in your heart. So what's it got to do with putting something on my head? So, we found that this helps. We found that this makes a difference. There's a story about it about Rav Nachman. There's this. There's that. There's all kinds of things. This is not halacha. It's not even a hechsher mitzvah. It's nothing. Why do we do it? Why do we? It's so strong that it's more than Torah now. The number one thing that defines whether you're a Jew is not whether you keep Shabbos or not, but whether you have a kippah on your head. You have a kippah on your head, and who knows what you do at home. But everybody considers you a good Jew. Because how did that happen? Because we have an idea that everything that we do in life, everything that we do in life, should be related to Torah, should be related to Hashem. Okay? So everything we ask about everything. So then people come and ask the Rebbe, should I buy this house or that house? And then the Rebbe writes, since when have we even heard that anybody but a prophet could tell you what kind of house to buy? What has it got nothing to do with me? So, but what can we do? The Jews, that's how they are. They want to believe that everything has to do with Hashem. So who are they going to come to ask for advice about their house? They're going to ask the bank teller? No, the guy in the bank, all he does is give them the money. He doesn't tell them which house to buy. He doesn't care. If they want to buy a house on this street or that street, it's their problem. They don't care. But I care about you, and meaning Hashem cares about you. Who is Hashem's emissary? The Rebbe. So I come and ask the Rebbe. So there you have an idea that the Torah goes well beyond the obligations. The Torah is in all the aspects of my life. So the moment that the Torah is in all the aspects of my life, there he says, since this is already a psychological premise that the Torah goes beyond. So there you can involve the individual, because again it's the individual doing it because he's interested in what the Torah has to say about everything. So since he's interested in it, you can't come and tell him, look, don't involve your personal interests in the things that you do above and beyond. Because the things that you do above and beyond, they stem from your interest, from your self-interest, because you have a self-interest in the Torah. You have a self-interest in being close to Hashem. And that's why by Hasidim, for instance, they even say, Minag Yisrael Torah. Okay? Why? Why is it Torah? In fact, it's so strong that Minhag Oker Halacha. Why is that? How could you say something like that? The Misnagdim, when they hear this, they go berserk. How can you say such a thing? Well, first of all, there's sources for it. But secondly, you have to begin to understand, what do you mean Oker Halacha? There's many different meanings. But really what it's saying is that because you're involved in it personally, in a minhag you're involved personally, that's why it happened. The minhag is a reflection of your personal interest in the topic. So that in some ways is stronger than a halacha. Because in the halacha, you only have the considerations of the halacha. But when you're talking about a minhag, you also have to have the considerations of the person's self-interest. And he's allowed to make conditions there. ונמצא על כל פנים מובן מכל הנ"ל שבכל המצוות אם עושה התוספת שלהם גם על מנת לקבל פרס מקרה צדיק גמור ובלבד שיקיים גם העיקר בלי שום תשלום גמול. So the first thing is, we learn from this that when it comes to the obligation, if you're doing more than the obligation, it's okay to ask, to make deals with Hashem if you want. So they have conditions. As long as, at the same time, you're holding a complex position, and you're saying, whatever Hashem requires me to do, that I do without any expectation of a reward. וכמו בתלמוד תורה, ללמוד כדי שישיג אחר כך פנימיות התורה, כמו שכתוב, אשרי מי שבא לכאן ותלמודו בידו. Have it tzaddik gamur. So if a person is learning in order to learn the inner dimension of Torah, which he's not required to. Nobody says you have to learn Kabbalah. Nobody says you have to learn Chassidus. It's not within the 3 parts of what the Rambam says you have to learn every day. So if you want to learn these things, it's very good. There you're allowed to say, I want a reward for it. I want something for it. As long as but you have to set some time apart every day, in the morning and in the evening, to learn just because Hashem told me to learn. And there you should learn halacha, you should learn something else, something that you can say about it, that I am performing my obligation. And I have no expectation. But when it comes to learning all this Chassidus, so really you can tell. You can tell what a person's about when you look at their library. If, like in my library, everything's about Chassidus and Kabbalah, so it means that I just want reward. And if you have a Shulchan Aruch and that's what you learn most of the day, so there it's just an obligation. Again, it doesn't really work because a lot of people learn Shulchan Aruch and they think, I'll get a reward for this also. But again, we said that's just good advice. Don't lead your life that way because it's not a good strategy. ואגב נתרץ קושיית התוספות בבבא בתרא דף ח' עמוד ב' דיבור, do we have to end? Do we have time for this Tosfos?
We've got 2 minutes.
Let's see if we can do it in 2 minutes. דיבור המתחיל לקפיה לרב נחמן ואי תימה והה בפרק כל אדם אמר כל מצוות עשה שמתן שכרה בצידה אין בית דין של מטה מוזרים עליה. This is a general principle. It says that if the Torah told us that there is a reward for a mitzvah, then the court, meaning the public, is not required to obligate the person to perform this. Because if the Torah told you what the reward is and you still don't want to do it, it's your problem. But what about tzedakah? לגבי צדקה כתיב, כי פתוח תפתח את ידך לו. It says you should surely open, or open and again and again, your arm, your hand, to give the poor person money. And it says right away, כי בגלל הדבר הזה יברכך השם אלוקיך. Right away it says the sachar, it gives the reward. It says that you'll be blessed by Hashem because of this. So there's a contradiction. So why do we obligate? Because we started this whole little mimer with his idea that what the Gemara is talking about is that they used to obligate to give tzedakah. So how do you reconcile these 2 sources? Why did they obligate if the reward is written in the Torah? ואפשר לומר דמעיקר אלוקה של כלל, דכך כתיב בפרשת ראה, פתוח תפתח, נתון תיתן, ולא ירא לבבך בתתך לו, כי בגלל הדבר הזה יברכך. Meaning that it's not because you'll give tzedakah that you will be blessed. But he says there's a part of the pasuk missing. ולא ירא לבבך. You shouldn't have a heavy heart when you give somebody tzedakah. If you don't have a heavy heart, not that you give, you're obligated to give. The addition here is that you should also feel good about it. Don't have a heavy heart because you lost your money. If you don't have a heavy heart, then Hashem will bless you. So he's talking not about the obligation to give tzedakah, but about the advice that the Torah says, don't feel bad about it. Okay? About that, if you also do it with a smiling face, and you're happy to give, then Hashem will bless you. That's the meaning. But it's not a meaning about if you gave and you did this, don't come here anymore. Maybe you insulted him, maybe this, but you still gave tzedakah. So when it comes to that, there's no reward. The reward that was discussed in the verse in Deuteronomy is about your general attitude when you're giving the tzedakah. והיינו בגלל מה שלא יראה לבבך בתתך לו, מכיוון שבית דין כופין אותו אם כן לא קיים, מה שכתוב ולא ירע לבבך, ולא אהבה מתן שכרה בצידה, ולכן בית דין מוזרין עליו לכופו. Therefore, there is no reward listed right after the mitzvah.
I think your clock is wrong.
Mm-hmm.